Hello. Thank you for joining us tonight. This is the Spring Hill Sewer Separation Community Meeting. This is our fall community meeting. I want to let you know first and foremost that we are recording this. It'll be posted to our website for viewing at a later date. I'd like to introduce myself. I'm Jesse Moose. I'm the construction liaison for the city of Somerville. I work in the Infrastructure and Asset Management Department with Dan Amlin, who you'll learn about later. And I am joined by Nick Aleckal, our Construction Public Information Officer. Let me take a look. We have 56 participants right now. I do see that Councillor Ben Ewan-Campen is here, and we'd like to give him the floor to introduce himself. So Councillor Nick is going to unmute you.
Hey, everybody. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Great. So for anyone that I haven't met, I'm Ben Ewan-Campen. I'm the Ward 3 City Councilor. I want to be really brief here because I know that the reason we're all here is to get updates and kind of look ahead for the streetscape and the sewer construction that's going on. But I did just want to take a brief moment to say hello to everybody and really to thank you all for being here. And of course, to thank you, Jesse, Dan, and Nick for putting this meeting together. I think it's really timely and important that we're having this meeting. And I obviously don't need to tell any residents here, but this is certainly the issue in the ward right now that I get the most emails and calls about. And what I really want to thank you all for is I can say that basically without fail, all of these emails and calls start with people saying that they understand how important this work is. And in many cases, they also say that they've already gotten really helpful information from Jesse, from Dan. But there are obviously real challenges to this scale of construction going on in a tight-knit residential neighborhood. And we are all really, really aware of that. And so I'm thankful to everyone who's kind of who's continuing to reach out and who is showing up to tonight's meeting. And I'm really looking forward to getting these updates and to hearing all of the questions that you all have tonight. So thanks again for being here.
Thank you, Councilor, for joining us, as well as we're up to now 76 folks. Slide, Dan. So let's go over tonight's agenda. So first, you're going to learn about the project team, both the city side and our contractors. We're going to discuss the progress of work. We broke ground in February of this year. We're going to talk about what's been completed so far. We're also going to look at what is upcoming. So, what work can be done in the winter and kind of a 6-month look ahead. Then we're going to talk about, we have frequently asked questions. The councilor alluded to that he's received many questions. We've also received many questions, and there's some that we get from different people multiple times. So we kind of put together kind of an FAQ, and we're going to address that. Most importantly is how to contact us. We are a team that is very responsive to issues. Construction is not easy and things happen, and we want to make sure that you know who to get in contact with and that we will find a resolution. And then finally, we will end the night with some questions. So we think the presentation will be about half an hour. That'll give us about an hour for questions, hopefully to wrap up by 7:30. Slide, Dan. Look at these handsome guys. This is the construction team. So I hope you all know me. I'm Jesse Moose. I'm the construction liaison for the city. I've worked for the city almost 13 years. I've been with the engineering team since 2018, when I also met my work husband, Dan Amlin, who joined us. We are also the project team for the Somerville Ave project. And I always make the joke that we're like a dynamic 70s cop show, where I'm the grizzled veteran and he's the young rookie with a heart of gold. And then actually this year, Nick joined us. So Nick has been our construction public information officer since July, adding to the trifecta. Nick has done a really great job of kind of just, hitting the floor running and kind of thinking of new ways that we can do outreach. So if you were walking around the neighborhood and saw a flyer that, invited you to this meeting tonight, that was Nick's idea. Also, if you get a robocall saying, we need to temporarily turn off your water, so we can install a new valve, that's Nick. So that is the team. Next slide, please. So these are our contractors. So Gioso is the general contractor. You may hear us say John Gioso, who's the foreman, a lot tonight. That's our main contact. We have design and construction oversight by Stantec. They are kind of overseeing GEOSO on a day-to-day basis, making sure they stick to the plans, quantities. And then finally, we have Hatch, designer of our green infrastructure. We probably are not going to talk about a lot tonight. That's definitely more of kind of a future meeting when we talk about, what we're doing in like spring 2023. Next slide, please. And with that, I'm going to actually turn it over to Dan. He's going to kind of take you through what our last year looked like and what to expect going forward.
Great. Thank you, Jesse. As Jesse mentioned, I'm Dan Amlin. I'm a project manager here with the city of Somerville from the engineering department, currently managing this project. So before we really get into the bulk of what this meeting is about, which spoiler alert, it's really just giving you an update on, the past 8.5 months of construction, going back to early February when we started, and a brief look ahead to kind of get us through the winter and into the spring. So that being said, I'm going to give a very brief overview, kind of give you a description of an intent of what this project is about here, and then we can kind of dive right in. So that being said, this is the Spring Hill Sewer Separation Phase 1 project. The limits are outlined here on your screen. We've got Highland Ave to the north, Summer Street to the south, School Street to the east, and let's call it Central Street to the west, although we do include Gibbons, Cambria, and Westwood within our project limits. So that being said, there's a lot of different facets that go into this project and why we're doing this project. Probably the most important are the three icons you see at the top here: new drainage, new sewer improvements, and improvements to our existing water system. All of which, more or less were built back in the 1880s. So prior to the start of this project, everyone within these limits, within this neighborhood, was basically living with 140-year-old utility systems. Time for an upgrade. Long overdue for an upgrade. So that's really a lot of the work that you've seen, starting back in kind of late winter, early spring this year, that's carried us through today. Has had a major focus on all of the underground utility work. As we get into next year, kind of looking from spring, summer 2023, we kind of transition out of upgrading all these utilities and now focusing on surface work. And what that entails is really kind of split between green stormwater infrastructure and tree plantings, and a lot of mobility improvements. For green stormwater infrastructure, we're going to be building bioretention basins, stormwater tree trenches. There's certain areas we are going to have some permeable materials, pavement, brick pavers. And then for mobility improvements, we're going to be installing a lot of curb bump outs, replacing a lot of sidewalks, installing bike lanes, separated bike lanes. Central Street, matter of fact, is going to have separated cycle tracks heading north and south. We'll have speed bumps, speed humps. And I'm sure there's something else I'm missing. It's a very long list. But that's kind of the icing on the cake, right? We get through all the utility work that almost all of you have had to endure here this year. And then when we start focusing on surface work, repaving roads, that's when this project kind of comes to fruition, in the sense that, all this time, all this money, and probably for most of you, all this agony turns into something much, much, much better than what you've been used to for a very long time. Moving on to progress of work. So I've alluded to this, like I mentioned, we started back in late February of this year. We really didn't hit the ground running until about April, when the weather broke. And since April, we've done quite a bit of work. All of that work to date has been on Summer Street, really more or less between Spring Street and School Street, Central Street, and Avon Street. On this map, you'll also notice kind of, we'll call it Lower Summer Street between School and Bow. Eversource Gas has actually been upgrading their gas main there for the past year. That is within our project limits. We have utility work to do there, but we won't be able to do it until Eversource Gas is complete. So to date, they've got about just shy of 1,000 feet of new gas main in. They're still going to be working in the School's Summer Street intersection for another few weeks. And then they've got to kind of fall back and reconnect new services to each individual residence here on Summer Street. At that point, and I'm kind of skipping ahead here, probably next year we'll be looking to do all the utility work that so many of you are now familiar with on that section of Summer Street next year.
One thing we should probably talk about is that, Eversource Gas also completed work on Central and School last year to allow us to get able to do our utility work now. So that's what is being finished up on Summer Street so that we can jump in next year, as Dan was saying.
Thank you, Jesse. Great point. So kind of before we get into, the nitty gritty of the work completed to date, first and foremost, let's talk about trees. Originally, this project had about 25 trees slated for removal. 15 have already been removed. We've got another 12 trees that will be coming down November 22nd and 23rd. So just in a couple weeks here. In these trees, we did have a tree hearing back in February. These trees are slated for removal, the majority of which are ash trees, which unfortunately suffer from the emerald ash borer insect, which sadly kills the tree. So they are hazardous and thus deemed slated for removal because of their poor health condition. The good news is we're planting 185 new trees. So there's a huge net positive here. We have to wait a little bit until we get to that portion of the project, which could happen as early as let's call it late summer, early fall, about a year from now, before we start kind of looking at tree plantings. But we just wanted to give you this quick update, knowing that the remainder of the trees that are slated to be removed will be removed here in the coming weeks. And that should be, and will most likely be it for the remainder of the project in terms of tree removals. So work completed to date. Let me dive into this in a second, but before I do, I will acknowledge there's a lot of words here. Plenty of our slides contain a lot of words, but we will have this presentation available on our city website. Should people want to come back and refer to some of these quantities, some of these more technical details. I don't want to bore you all to death reading each and every individual line, but we did think it was important to highlight exactly what's been done since we started this work. So many of you have thankfully been patient with us in the construction process here, and it hasn't been in vain. So Summer Street, for example, we've got 2,500 new feet of new drainage, almost 30 new manholes, a little more than a dozen catch basins. Again, apologies, I've got a small child. I don't know if you can hear him screaming, but if you do, my apologies. All new sewer pipe, and this next one's pretty interesting, and this kind of applies to a lot of streets here within this project. Despite some of these sewer mains and sewer systems being roughly 140 years old, engineers back in the late 1800s did a really good job of building these. Each sewer is typically made out of brick, all installed by hand. Obviously nowadays we typically use it's like a Schedule 40 plastic sewer pipe. Point being, there's a lot of structural integrity within these sewer lines that even now, 140 years later, are still in relatively good condition. So rather than have to spend more money than is necessary to preserve these, for those who don't know, we have this process called cast in place pipelining, which, if you can almost envision it, it's a kind of like a polyurethane sock, and it gets pulled through the sewer and then it gets inflated to the diameter of the sewer. When it cures, it is essentially a new sewer pipe built within an existing. The goal here is preserve as much of this historic sewer as we can without creating more disruptions and more impacts to your everyday lives, while at the same time really increasing the longevity of these pipes by at least another 50, 75, possibly 100 years. So I just wanted to point that out here as we're kind of going through some of this, that it's a really cool technology that we're starting to see more and more frequently on city projects. And lastly, and I know some of you here likely have a lot of questions about all the water work we've been doing. Our water mains, similar, they're over a century old. All of the valves that we have are are starting to corrode. Pipes are getting tuberculated, which for those who don't know, tuberculation is think of, you've got a typical water main this diameter. Tuberculated pipes buildup occurs on the walls of the pipe, and it slowly constricts and gets smaller and smaller. Obviously, that impacts the flow going to your home. It impacts fire suppression and kind of slows everything down. So we'll be replacing water mains on just about every street within the project limits. So far on Summer Street, for instance, all this work on Summer Street, by the way, again, Spring Street to School Street, we replaced a little under a half a mile of water main already. Central Street, more or less the same thing in terms of what we've done. And here we have Avon Street and Carter Terrace. Again, all new drainage systems, pipes, manholes, catch basins, all new sewer pipes, sewer manholes, and new water mains. One thing I do want to note for those residents who are joining us tonight from Avon Street, you may have noticed over the past few weeks, the sidewalk on the southern portion of the street get torn up. There was an old transite pipe that carried a fire alarm cable that unfortunately interfered with a lot of the sewer service laterals and water service laterals that connect to your home. That pipe, transite, is essentially asbestos. So we did not see a good reason to leave that in the ground. We removed that to try to expedite the schedule on Avon Street and get our contractor GeoSo out of there sooner than later. And that's really all we've been able, not all we've been able to accomplish. It is a great amount of work that's been done here in the past 8 months.
Dan, getting Summer Street done, which is kind of one of our major milestones of this project. That's a huge thing to get done in our first year.
Yeah, I don't want people to see 4 streets and think, why is that only it? One of the biggest challenges we have with this work and actually getting it accomplished is a slew of other utilities, communications cable, fire alarm duct banks, as I just mentioned, gas mains, electrical lines. These are all buried underground. And over 100 years, a lot more things end up in the ground. And it's comes a time, days where we're only installing 10 feet of pipe because of all these other utilities that conflict with what we're trying to do. So at times it can be a bit grueling of a process, given all these other issues that come up, and at times may delay us, but our contractor's been diligent, has been very proactive, I will say, in coming up with ideas on how do we expedite the schedule. So we're not delayed, which we aren't, but we don't want to get that to that point, right? We want to get our work done. We want you all to resume your normal lives as you did prior to the start of this project. So there's a lot of consideration being taken on our end and kind of in conjunction with our consultant, Stantec, on how do we get the product that we want to be installed correctly, to be installed adequately to our satisfaction, but still try to push this construction work forward in such a way that it doesn't lag, it doesn't delay, we get done sooner than later. So with that, this is kind of a very brief overview of all the work that's been done. If anyone's interested, I'm happy to talk for hours about all the nuances that go into this. But moving on, our look ahead schedule. So Jesse alluded to this during the introductions here at the start of this presentation. We are going to be having another meeting next spring. The focus here now is to kind of look what's happening between now and March, April of next year. As Jesse mentioned, there is ample work to be done that can be done during cold weather, during the winter. So all the streets you see in front of you, Highland Ave, Berkeley Street, Oxford Street, Cambria Street, and Westwood Road. At some point or another here in the next 2 months, our contractor will begin drainage work and sewer work. Those are the 2 predominant pieces of work that can be done during cold weather. I do want to make a special note because each of these streets does have language that says they will be getting new water mains, new water services, and hydrants. We don't do that work over the winter.
No.
To address a question that may come up later on, Many of you, especially on Summer Street, Central Street, Avon Street, have been connected to a temporary bypass main, which is essentially a temporary water conveyance while we upgrade the existing, or upgrade or replace rather, the water main that's in the street. We can't do this temporary bypass main during the winter because that pipe sits at grade. So it's exposed to the elements, it's exposed to freezing temperatures. And the last thing we would ever want to do is have a situation where your drinking water is frozen at the pipe. So this is why we don't allow this work to happen during the winter.
And Dan, one of the other things we should mention is that, Gioso now is finishing up on Avon and Central, and they're going to be removing you from the bypass.
Yes. You beat me to it, Jesse.
It's like a team.
Yeah, so for those residents here joining us tonight that live on Central, that live on Avon, you're going to get this information now. Our contractor is actively trying to remove that bypass by installing new water services to your homes within the next 2 weeks. The schedule to complete that work is to have everything done for both Avon and Central by Thanksgiving. It's a challenge. As many of you know, we are now, especially in the last day or two, getting into colder and colder overnight temperatures. So this work to remove the bypass, remove each of you from a temporary bypass connection is being prioritized so that come Thanksgiving, you are back connected to a main underground. And the risk of having your water service freeze is next to pretty much zero, right? So we can kind of talk more about this here in the next few slides, but I just want everyone to understand more or less drainage, sewer work that can be done during the winter, water work cannot. So now we're going to move into kind of a breakdown of work for each street that's within the project limits. For those of you who joined us in the spring, a lot of this is going to look pretty similar, where we outlined each facet of work for each street. We have the pleasure now of showing you what's been complete for each street and what still remains. And again, spoiler alert, we haven't started any streetscape surface work yet. We've got to get through all the underground utility work before we get to that point, which will likely be the beginning of next year, April, excuse me. So that being said, and a lot of these slides look the same. I won't repeat every single one because I know plenty of you have questions for us and we want to give you enough time to ask them and receive an answer. But for instance, Avon Street, in the spring, we talked about subsurface improvements that you should all expect. Well, now we're close to finishing Avon Street and we've got new sewer structures and pipes, new drainage structures and pipes, and new water mains and services, which are currently being worked on now with the goal of completing these by or really completing the water services by Thanksgiving. We will be coming back to line the sewers. It could happen this winter. We'll for anyone who's interested, we can refer back to the schedule that we received from our contractor. But as we've done in the past for some of you residents on other streets, portions of Oxford, Westwood, Cambria, we distribute flyers in addition to the contractor distributing flyers, letting you know when your sewer service is going to be, or excuse me, when your sewer pipe on your street is going to be lined. That does require us to block your sewer lateral. We do come back and cut that liner out of where your sewer lateral exits your house and connects to that pipe, but it does have an impact on you in your home. And as we kind of move forward through this process, and I'll just be blunt, we're not perfect. We try to update everyone with as much information as we receive, which at times can be subject to subcontractors, suppliers, changes in schedule. So we certainly, look forward to improving our communications with you all, whether it's through flyer notifications, CTY calls that Nick will put together, web updates that Nick could put together. So these are all, different ways that we want to communicate with you about some of the changes you can expect to happen here in the future. So that being said, just to give you all a taste of what this type of work looks like. Here's just some photos. We've got photos for a couple of streets, not every single one, but as you can tell here on Avon Street, on the left, we've got a sewer pipe installation. On the right, we've got a sewer water main installation, excuse me. They look an awful similar, two completely very different things. And as we kind of get through this, and I think there's a slide for Central Street that I want to point out. Digging through city streets, as I mentioned earlier, you're going to come across a slew of different other utilities. If you can tell in the photo on the right, if it's kind of in the foreground, there's a pipe that crosses that trench. It's very small. But these are things that we try to anticipate and expect. We don't always know where they are. So depending on the work we're doing, the depth at which we're excavating, you may uncover other utilities that weren't known at, when this project got designed. Just due to the nature of these streets, the age of these utilities, and everything that happened, in the years between, that certainly predate the three of us working for the city. So it's certainly challenging work. We're certainly trying to do our best here and get this work complete with minimal disruptions and impacts to each and every one of you. Here on Berkeley Street, as I mentioned in a previous slide, we haven't started work. Actually, we just started work on Berkeley Street here this week.
Yep.
Prior to this week, we hadn't touched Berkeley Street. So that's why if you look to the left, subsurface improvements, nothing is checked off because nothing's been complete. We just started work here. So this work is going to continue through the winter, predominantly sewer and drainage work. And in our springtime meeting, I hope to be talking a whole lot more about streetscape improvements than utility work, but there will be a mix of both. Good news on Cambria Street, we've already lined that sewer. For the folks here from Cambria Street, we are expecting to start some work in December, so next month. For the folks on Carter Terrace, thank you, you've endured a lot here on your street. You've got new sewer structures, new drainage structures, new water main, new water services. We will have to come back and line the very short section of sewer on your street. Central Street, which has likely been a bear for a lot of folks using Central as their main thoroughfare to get home. We've been on Central Street here for the better part of 6+ months. We're wrapping up our work here by Thanksgiving, and we can finally reopen the roadway in two directions. Again, it's the completion of sewer, drainage, water, and sewer lining. So it's a lot of work. And to kind of show you what I mean, here's some photos from Central Street. On the left, we've got a drainage structure being installed closer, kind of down by the Summer Street intersection. Up by the Somerville Museum, you can see a new water main being installed. And one thing I want to point out, which I don't want to get too far ahead of myself, the bricks you see in the photo on the right, in front of the Somerville Museum, those are historic bricks. It's kind of cool. They've got the letter S stamped in them. We plan to save those and reuse those on the streetscape end when we come back to construct the streetscape. They will be used as a buffer between, call it the southbound cycle track and the roadway. And I'll stop talking now. I'll flip slowly through here. I may actually start talking here again in a second. Gibbon Street, this work probably won't happen until next spring. I know there's some ancillary work going on now, but the bulk of it will happen next year. And Highland Ave, I spoke too soon when I said I'd stop talking, flip through these. We've done a few test pits on Highland Ave. We are slated to be performing some pavement cores on Highland Ave in the next, really this week, next week. We understand that Highland Ave, the condition of the roadway is subpar. It's a very rough road to drive on. I'll take this time to mention, within this project, we currently don't have plans to perform any surface work. We do have a future project specifically for Highland Ave to perform all these surface improvements. Without knowing how far into the future that is, there may be opportunities here to do some restoration work as we get closer to the end of this project, given the condition of how the roadway turns out after we do our utility work. So the one piece I do want to mention, which could happen in the next week or two, we do have utility work at the intersection of Central and Highland, on Highland between Central and School Street. We are going to have detours for this work, even though you think the roadway is pretty wide as it is. The location of the sewer is more or less in the center of the road. We will have to remove some parking, and we will have to detour westbound traffic. So what that's going to look like, I'll kind of walk you through what this detour is going to look like here for the total duration of all this work from the intersection all the way to School Street is about 2.5 months. The first part at the intersection, it's not going to be the whole intersection at once. We more or less have to bisect the intersection into 2 halves. And the reason is we want to at least maintain one direction of traffic. It will be the eastbound lane. And part of the decision to maintain eastbound traffic is due to the fact that Somerville Fire Department has a firehouse further west on Highland Ave, kind of closer to Cedar Street. For the work in the intersection Highland Ave, the westbound lane coming from McGrath Highway will be detoured south onto School Street, west onto Summer Street, north onto Belmont Street, and then west again on Highland Ave to resume the route. As I mentioned, just given the location of where these sewer and drain utilities are, in the depths at which we have to excavate and the machinery that our contractor has to use, we can only keep one lane of traffic open safely. So for the first portion of this intersection, we're going to take the northern half of Central at Highland. That's about 1.5 weeks. This could start middle to end of next week. We have not given our contractor an approved traffic management plan yet. It is being reviewed by our office. It's currently being reviewed by Somerville Fire Department to see what kind of impacts they have to their emergency response. But this is going to happen in the coming weeks. Luckily, the duration here at the intersection is, for this portion, is only 1.5 weeks. When we move to the southern half, that's also 1.5 weeks. So within 3 weeks, we'll be done with this intersection. Actually, I'm going to back up. For anyone coming southbound on Central towards Highland, you won't be able to access Highland Ave. There will be a detour for traffic to take a right turn onto Hudson Street and to take a left turn. I think that's Waldo, if I'm not mistaken, to get to Highland Ave. And then at that point, you can go left or right.
Yeah, that is Waldo, Dan.
It is Waldo. Thank you. When they take the southern half of this intersection, there won't be access to Highland Ave from Central Street northbound. So for everyone on Oxford, Berkeley, Avon, Gibbons, Cambria, and Westwood, if you opt to go on Central Street, you will be directed south towards Summer. Again, this is only 1.5 weeks, at which point our contractor will be taking up the area in orange you see on your screen. Again, eastbound traffic will be maintained. Westbound traffic will carry the same detour, School to Summer to Belmont. Given the stretch of roadway here and understanding that there will be impacts, we anticipate this work taking 2 months, ending sometime in January 2023, starting in December. When this happens, we want to still acknowledging that there's plenty of businesses, there's care facilities, there's residential homes. We want to try to minimize the impacts on each and every one of you. If there are certain areas where our contractor is working and other areas that they've already completed, we'd be looking at different situations where, we take parking away from this section while they work there. As they progress, we take parking further up the road and put the parking back in place when we're no longer directly in front of your business or your home. It will be challenging. Please be patient with us. But if there's areas that, whether it's the construction, whether it's communication, anything that we can improve upon, we want to hear about. And Jesse's going to give you a great way to let us know your thoughts and opinions and concerns towards the end of this presentation. So that's Highland Ave. That's upcoming here in the next week or so. We wanted to tell you here, like I said, we don't have an approval yet, but it does seem imminent. So back to streets. Oxford Street, we've lined sewers. We'll be starting next month with some more sewer work and drainage work. School Street likely won't start until next spring. There's just only so many areas we can work at once, given the amount of crews our contractor has available. So there'll be more emphasis on School Street when we meet again next April. And Summer Street, we have this broken up into two sections. As I mentioned earlier, Eversource Gas has been working on Summer Street between School and Bow Street. We can't work there until next year. For the section between Spring Street and School Street, however, this is more or less what we just completed. The street's been picked up. You know, we've heard from a lot of you and have seen with our own eyes some of the, let's call it a mess, let's call it what it is. And we asked our contractor, you know, before you start work on other streets, you need to clean up Summer Street. Certainly there's residents who have had to stare at drainage structures in front of their house. There's residents who have had to deal with detour signs being placed on their fence or on their property. These are things we don't condone. We don't take them lightly. Jesse, Nick, and myself are not out there every day. We do have Stantec available on site, but they can't be everywhere at once either. So we encourage you, if there's certain things that are going on in the street, if there's, you know, cleanliness issues, dust issues, which we've just heard about here in the past couple days, past week, which I'm happy to say are going to be addressed here in the next day or two. We want to hear about it. You know, we acknowledge this work is cumbersome, it's impactful. We don't want your concerns to fall on deaf ears. We want to hear so that we can make adjustments. We can work with our contractor, we can work with our consultant Stantec to improve as much as we can for each and every one of you to have, you know, some sense of normalcy here while we do all this heavy utility work.
And we'll talk more about how you can reach out to us going forward in this presentation.
Yeah. Just a couple photos. This is kind of in the middle of Summer Street there. It's a pretty neat photo of how we build catch basins. I know many of you see the grate at the surface level, but may not know what it looks like underground. It's a more or less a big cylinder that captures our drainage, our surface runoff. A couple more photos showing you, you know, just what goes into completing a project like this. You know, the depths at which we excavate. The photo on the left, you can see there's a couple different pipes crossing. Some of them are encased in concrete, but we have to take precautions not to rip these things out of the ground. They do serve an important purpose. So we do not want to disrupt those. So at times it is slow. It is, you know, meticulous, but it's what it takes to get this work done. What I alluded to earlier, Summer Street between Bow and School. We likely won't start work there until about March next year. So we can revisit that in the spring. And Westwood Road, last but not least. Again, the schedule that we have available to us, the most recent schedule shows this work predominantly starting next spring. So I hope I've answered some questions already, but for those who are curious, here are some of the questions that we've received to date from residents, from constituents, from counselors. We certainly tried to capture, you know, as general as we could. I don't think we could get every specific question listed on here for this evening, but we wanted to kind of go over what we see from you all and, you know, provide some of the answers that we've provided to your neighbors. Broken down into three categories. First is water quality. A lot of questions we received early back in the spring and early summer is, what is this pipe? What is this blue hose that's now connected to my house? As I mentioned, that's our temporary water bypass pipe that provides you clean drinking water. You are connected because they de-energize. They basically flush out the existing main so they can either remove sections, remove it in full, and replace it with brand new pipe. The process to connect each individual building, home to water bypass, typically what our contractor will do is connect that plastic rigid blue hose to a faucet, a spigot, like a hose spigot, backfeed your house while they take the existing main out of service. More often than not, what that means is they bypass the water meter on your house. One question that we receive probably the most frequently, honestly, is how does this affect your water bill? Unfortunately, Jesse and I, we both work in engineering. Nick is communications. None of us work for the water department. How the water department bills is more so a question for them. However, what's been explained to us and what we've conveyed to some of you is that, when the water meter on your house is being basically bypassed by this temporary connection, the water department will estimate your usage based on the previous year's usage. So for instance, if for the month of May, you were connected to this temporary bypass system, the water department would then look at your water bill from a year ago in May and apply the same rate. Like I said, this is what's been described to us that we've conveyed to you. Should you have questions on this that we can't answer, what I would recommend is contacting the water department. They may be able to provide you a better reasoning as to how they bill each of you during construction, but we found that it was an important enough question to include here tonight and just speak briefly to. Another question that we received a handful of times was for those who are observing what's happening on Central Street just south of Summer Street. We did have a 2-inch hose that was basically releasing water down Central Street for quite some time. That hose was connected to our low pressure main, which in order to construct the new main further up on Central Street, north of Summer, we had to cut that pipe and cap it in place, essentially creating a dead end where Central comes up to Highland up the hill. One of the challenges with having a dead-ended water main is that water won't circulate at that dead end. It stays there, which could cause poor water quality. It can increase coliform bacteria. And the best way to mitigate that and try to eliminate that from happening is to keep water circulating. So in working with our water department, we basically tapped into that dead-ended main and allowed water to trickle out for as long as it has, so that everyone still connected to it south of Summer Street still has clean drinking water each and every day. As we've alluded to, the work on Central Street is going to be wrapping up by Thanksgiving. Understanding that we're getting closer to freezing temperatures, we certainly don't want that water freezing up going down Central Street. So our goal is to have that removed here in the next 2 weeks. Moving on to sanitary sewer services connections. Again, we've gotten plenty of questions about this type of work here and some of the impacts that some of you have experienced. One of the most common questions we get is, will my sewer service connection be replaced? And the short answer is, for some of you, yes. For some of you, no. It really depends on the work we're doing. There are definitely locations where we will replace the sewer lateral up to your property line. And there's certain situations where we'll replace the sewer lateral within that zone of influence of our work. So think of a trench. If we have to cross your sewer lateral, sometimes it calls for that section, 5 feet wide, 6 feet wide to be replaced. Sometimes we accidentally hit it, which has happened a number of times. Our contractor is responsible for repairing that. Which leads us to, some of you have had sewer backups. Certainly not something we want to have happen. To be quite honest, we actively try to avoid that from happening. But however, again, we're not perfect. The city's infrastructure is more or less ancient. And from time to time it happens. if you do have a sewer backup and you think it is a result of ongoing construction, we want you to let us know as soon as possible. The few instances where this has happened, we notified our contractor right away. And for some of you, our contractor showed up and fixed the issue. I can't say with any degree of certainty that it's going to be our contractor's fault each and every time. But we do want to hear about it if it does happen. In the event that, you know, if our contractor is responsible, we will hold them responsible and have it repaired. And we don't want things to linger for longer than need be for, you know, we want to prevent damage to your home, to your basement, to your pipes, etc. And kind of last frequently asked question here, one that's been popular here over the last week, which we certainly acknowledge, can't deny, is there's been a lot of dust in and around Central Avon Street. Obviously, there's dust because the roadway hasn't been paved yet. There's a lot of gravel and call it dirt trenches that are out there. It's certainly been dry. And speaking with our contractor today, they're actually putting together an improved dust control plan. One question that did come up was how often do they sweep? And although they have their own basically in-house street sweeper, it may not have a vacuum attachment on it if I'm not mistaken. So it may just broom some of the dust around, which certainly doesn't help. Our contractor is going to be using calcium chloride and spreading that on our open trenches, the trenches that aren't paved. And what calcium chloride essentially does is it pulls in moisture from the air and it dampens the soil, the dirt, the gravel underneath, so that dust does not get kicked up. It's an extremely effective way of dealing with dust. It means they don't have to go up and down the street every day, spraying thousands of gallons of water on the street to keep dust down. And the good thing about calcium chloride is as they spread it, you know, you say the first time you come out, you spread calcium chloride, it takes the dust down. A week later, you start noticing more. Every application thereafter just helps mitigate and eliminate dust more than it did the first time. So it is an effective way at controlling dust. They will be implementing this here, hopefully tomorrow. But certainly, as we kind of go over the next few weeks, as this effort is happening, if it's not working, we want to know about it. We'll go back to our contractor, come up with another revised, better plan, and do whatever it takes to keep dust down. And with that, I'm going to kick it back over to Jesse. I know we've talked a lot about, we want to hear from you each and every day with any concerns or comments you have, and Jesse's going to let you know how to do that.
All right, so we definitely talked a lot tonight about contacting us, and we want to make sure that you guys are well aware the best ways to get in touch with us. My email, that's my cell phone number, and I actually run the Somerville Infrastructure Twitter account. Feel free to tweet at me. We have our construction at somervillema.gov email address that goes to the three of us. And then we also have our website page below that you can ask questions on as well. But really, I would say the best way to get in touch is just call me. Like my phone is always on. I will get back to you. I pride myself in accountability to this project. So if anything comes up, I can be your first call. Also, if you call 311, they'll connect you with me if that's easier as well. But I'd write that number down. Now is the part of our presentation. We're going to take questions, and something happened that I found a little unexpected. We have 31 questions in the chat tonight, Dan. So I think I'm just going to read one, and then we can discuss it. And then after that, we'll start actually unmuting folks if they want to speak to us. But we should address the 31 that's coming first. So, Dan, you want to click the slide button? All right. Question number 1. Construction activity is occurring on our street, but we are not getting notices about the insurance documentation review, and the company said they are not on our street yet. What happens if the current work damages our house? Once again, this is something you guys should reach out to Dan and myself about. You can just shoot me an email with your address. I will forward your contact information to GEOSO. We're using a subcontractor to go around and do home inspections before we do any sort of major construction. They reached out by doing certified letters at first, then just kind of basic knocks on the door. It is possible that, you know, you didn't receive the letter, you were not home and they knocked on the door. We want to make sure that this is happening and they're documenting, you know, the current conditions, and then if anything was to happen during construction, we can review photos and then discuss if a claim should be made.
Let me just add to that, Jesse, real quick.
Sure.
For those of you who are joining us who are renting, Jesse mentioned we send out pre-construction inspection letters. Basically, a letter saying, would you like to have your home inspected prior to the start of this work on your street? Should something happen, we have a record of what it was before. For the renters that are out there, these letters are addressed to the building owner. If you have concerns that your building has not been inspected, please contact the owner of your apartment, your building, and follow up with them to see if they've received a letter.
Okay, question number 2. When construction occurs, water shut off or strong smell in house, we are not getting notices about when it will happen, but some of our neighbors are getting paper flyers. How do we get paper flyers? We are already on the email notifications and they do not say when our water will be turned off. That's a good question. So as we were talking earlier, Nick does handle the CTY robocalls. Flyers are usually handed out when we have planned work. So we try and have at least 48 hours in advance of a water shutdown. If some sort of emergency work happens, there usually isn't amount of time for the contractor to run out, make flyers and hand them out. So let's say, you know, we're shutting off a valve to do a shutdown on Berkeley Street, but we find that the line actually extends to Cambria. So unfortunately, Cambria is now without water. And the best way that we deal with this is we would do a robocall to the larger affected area. So that's probably why you didn't get paper flyers that day. But we do make a point of them being handed out by the contractor 48 hours in advance. Question number 3. There is no notification of when a street will be open or closed, and it changes even midday. Is there a schedule of a way to know when streets will close before you go to the end of the street? Then you have to back up a block or 2 driving backwards on small residential streets to get out. This is fair criticism for us. We need to get better at keeping our contractor to one location or 2 locations at a time and make sure that the signage is correct and we're not sending anyone down a street that leads to a dead end or basically being stuck. So we appreciate comments like this. This is something that we will definitely be working more with the contractor going forward. All these are anonymous, by the way. A neighbor said they have brown water for about a month. What should we do if our water gets brown and unusable? Who do we contact and would also take that long to resolve? This is another one. You can start with me. Carlos Perez is our water engineer. He practically is part of this project. He is the first person I would call if that happened, and he would come check it out, and then we would figure out how to remediate the issue. Dan, this was one, was there a blow off? I believe it's probably about Central Street. The corner of Oxford and Central.
Oh, yes. Yeah, so this was another similar situation where we had a dead-ended pipe, and because it's temporarily dead-ended, there's basically the inside of the pipe, you know, you may get flakes of rust, things like that, tuberculation that's built up over time, being pushed to the end of the pipe and then being drawn into your house. It's oftentimes the most common reason why you'd see brown, dirty water. Call us that day.
Right.
There's, you know, otherwise we won't know about it. But there are solutions to address that. For instance, the home at the corner of Oxford and Central experienced this very same issue. If I'm not mistaken, they had brownish yellow water for quite some time. Also have young kids at home. So also a parent I can sympathize. What we ended up doing is a little bit extra work for a contractor, but we connected them to a temporary bypass main. And I believe almost instantly that water cleared up. They were getting clean, fresh water, and problem solved.
Right. But once again, contact us immediately. You know, we want to fix anything we can in real time. Next question. Will you be doing utility work on Hershey Street running between Oxford and Berkeley? If so, when? If not, why not? So the work going on in Berkeley right now is actually the corner of Hershey and Berkeley. So we are installing new catch basins, Dan.
We have new catch basins, new drains, right at the intersection of Hershey and Berkeley. We have more work to do at the intersection of Hershey and Oxford. And in between, we've got catch basins and new water going in on Hershey.
Right.
Apologies, we skipped that in the presentation. Please don't take offense.
It will be in our April presentation. Thank you for the question.
Jesse and yeah, sorry to interject quickly. We've had a few requests in the chat to put the contact information back up so people can
Of course.
copying it down.
Yes, apologies. Yep, there it is.
All right, our next question. Janet Moonen asks, would you be willing to share how many parking spots the city will be removing through this work? I'm going to read off the breakdown. Central Street is going to lose 32 spots. This is because we are building a cycle track. School Street will lose 13 spots. Summer Street west of school, 19 spots. Summer Street east of school, 23 spots. Avon Street will lose 4 spots. Berkeley Street, 6 spots. Oxford, 6 spots. Gibbons, 5 spots. Cambria, 4 spots. And Westwood, 4 spots. I know that's probably.
Most of those spots, Avon Street are 4 spots, Cambria 4 spots. Those are at the ends of the street.
Right.
We plan to basically put in a curb bump out, narrow the crosswalk. We'll need to take spots on either side at the ends of each of those streets. It's more common here for a lot of these streets than others.
Right. So there is some parking being removed, but it's also to add bump outs, new green infrastructure. There is a plus to the removal. Our next question. It seems with the work zone detour that there's going to be severe congestion along Benton Road. Is there any consideration to make it temporarily one way? We can definitely discuss that with our traffic engineer if she thinks that is a good move, but as of right now, we're going to be using the detour we presented, but we appreciate that comment.
Yeah, and for whomever asked that question, we deliberately opted not to use Benton as part of the detour route, given the narrow roadway width and two-way configuration with parking on both sides. It's a very narrow street as it is, and we acknowledge it can't support the traffic that we'd otherwise see in the detour. So we opted to use Belmont. We understand that there are going to be people who likely will cut through and use Benton. We can try to enforce vehicles from not using Benton with additional signage and things like that. So again, as we get into this detour, please let us know if for those on Benton, the traffic levels are getting unbearable. Please tell us, we'll make adjustments.
Right. A similar question from Anton Tedder. Hey, Anton. The Highland Ave detour will cause westbound travelers to cut through Oxford and Cambria. How can this be prevented? I think that's something we obviously need to review when the work starts. We'll have very clear signage taking people down school to then make a right onto Summer. But I can fully understand, a local traveling car thinking they can just cut through Oxford. So I think it's going to be something that we need to review once the detour starts and then make changes.
And to some extent too, we will be doing work on both Berkeley and Oxford. There will be, road closed open to a butter signs only where Oxford and Berkeley meet School Street. So certainly won't stop everyone. It'll hopefully dissuade them,
but. Next question, kind of similar from Donald Wade. With the condition of Summer Street, how do you expect traffic to flow at all with the detour? We will have detail officers located throughout the project limits through the detour. And once again, we will make recommendations to make changes if necessary. Like, this is not something that we just start and walk away and mission accomplished banner falls behind us. Like, we will be on site probably day one, just making sure this is flowing correctly.
Yeah.
Another question from Anton. How will the Highland Ave detour affect construction at 124 Highland? How will the large vehicles access the site if Highland is closed? Dan, you've had actually the most recent conversations with the 124 Highland developers. Do we know where they are with the project?
Yes, yes. So to reiterate, I guess if it is helpful, I can pull that slide back up. Why don't I do that while I'm talking? Give me 1 second. So with this detour, as I mentioned, we will allow eastbound traffic heading towards McGrath. For the development at 124 Highland, where right at the corner of Trull. The only remaining work they have left to do, I just had a meeting with them on site this past Monday to kind of outline what their schedule is and where they'll be working. They really don't have any work left to do on Highland Ave itself. They've already completed all their water work that was done last year. They have some drainage and some sewer work to complete, which I believe they just started here in the past 2 days. It should take about 2 weeks for them to do what they need to do. The majority of that work is about halfway down Trull, so the backside of 124 Highland, down to Oxford Street. I don't think they have any drainage or sewer work up near Highland. For their vehicles to access that work, they could go up Central, take a right onto Highland Ave, and take a right onto Trull and park there. They may have to use Oxford Street. But again, this, if they have 2 to 3 weeks of work left, we'll be working in the Highland Central intersection. When we get to this point here on the screen where we're working between Central and School Street, in theory, 124 Highland should be complete. Obviously, I can't guarantee that. It's private development work that we're coordinating with, but certainly, Anton, we will keep you updated as things move forward with kind of how we coordinate with the developer there and their contractors and kind of the work we're doing in the area to try to minimize impacts here.
Dan, I'm looking at our graphic right now, and I think that we're scaring people. So the big orange, are the sidewalks going to be blocked for this construction?
Mostly on the north side. There will be times where we do have to take a portion of the sidewalk. Our contractor is required to provide temporary crosswalks, signage, striping, ramps around wherever we're working. But big picture, most of the work here is in the roadway.
Right. And it's really just on one side of the road, right? It's not.
It's on the north side of the road. Yep.
Right. So that will allow buses to come through, emergency vehicles to come through.
Yes. So despite, we're going to be detouring general traffic, emergency service vehicles, police, fire, ambulance, and buses will still be able to travel both ways on this section of Highland Ave.
Yeah. And we don't anticipate, we have the big orange balloon, but like they're not going to really close Central to School at the same time. Like we're chunking this, correct?
Yes.
Yeah. So we're going to do between Central and Trull as phase 1, and then jump to phase 2 of Trull to School.
Yeah.
So this is intimidating. As someone who has to manage this is intimidating, but it's not as bad as this graphic looks. This is all encompassing.
Yeah. It's more of a mobile setup where, they start closer to Central, here,
Yeah.
Work in progression. Yep.
All right. So Crystal asked, when you were talking about detours, actually go back to, I think a lot of these questions are about Highland.
Okay, I'll keep it up. No, not a problem.
When you're talking about detours for traffic, does that mean all traffic, cars, bike, people in wheelchairs and pedestrians? Or to ask a different way, are there plans any different for people who need wheelchair access or who are on bikes? So bikes will be part of the detour. We will, as Dan was just saying, this will be open for buses, emergency vehicles, but we do expect bikes to be able to use the same detour as others. I mean, I think bikes could probably go down Oxford Street and not be such an issue. I don't know if Anton would be happy with that as they go by his house, but he's a biker. For wheelchair access, I think that's something we have to look at in the field. We definitely want to make sure that we, some of the work is near where there are accessible spots. We want to make sure that we are giving an alternative for people who need those spots, especially since there are businesses in that area.
Like I mentioned, with temporary crosswalks being installed while some of this work is going on, say we have to dig into the sidewalk to replace a water service or sewer service, our crosswalks will need to be ADA accessible. And
Right.
we will ensure that happens. Yep.
Another Highland Ave question, though we kind of talked about this when you had the original slide up. Highland Ave is really scary, dangerous to bike on due to lack of separated bike lanes and poor road conditions. Any update on making it safer? So this is from Chris Ostel. Chris, our project doesn't include that, though. When our contractor is done doing the work here, they will do a trench restoration of this portion of Highland. But it will be a future project that will deal with Highland Ave, doing paving and
Yes.
bike improvements, though just not this one. And I don't have a timeline for that. Sorry. This one's from Anonymous. What is the plan to notify the businesses and residents about this detour? There are multiple daycares, YMCA's, etc. We're going to flyer. So myself, Nick, and possibly Dan will go door to door. We'll have a flyer with our contact information. We'll talk to the businesses, explain the duration, know who they can contact. Very much this project, this presentation, but in person. So that is part of our strategy.
We may spend a little bit extra time here, especially knowing there's 2 daycares on Highland Ave, closer to Central Street. Understandably, a lot of parents drop their kids off. We want to understand how that happens. You know, are they mostly walking, driving? What's the most common method of transportation to get kids to these daycares? Going at least for the daycares, if not most of the businesses, going above and beyond, having conversations, understanding, how operations work and what we can do to accommodate, normal business, normal operations.
So we got a similar question to what we just spoke to. I get the question is, will water have to be shut off to the daycares as part of the Highland Ave work, causing them to close?
Not planned, certainly not planned. Like we mentioned, water work can't be performed during the winter just due to constraints around temperature and weather and things. The majority of this work is drainage and sewer related. I don't want to make any guarantees that, if something comes up or we don't know where a water service is in advance. Accidents do happen sometimes. It may require an emergency shut off, but that's certainly something that we're not planning on or anticipating, especially given the work that we're doing is unrelated to water at this time.
Right. And we will, there'll be our first call if something does happen, knowing that, we don't want the daycare to shut down. We got an anonymous one. If this will take 2 months, can there be temporary speed bumps put on Summer Street to reduce speeding with the increased traffic? Unfortunately, the city does not put temporary speed bumps anywhere. It's just something that we don't do. But good news is that this project, the finished product, does call for speed humps in this area. So it won't be. Sure.
For many of you that have driven on Summer Street between spring and school, what the condition of that roadway is. There's a lot of trenches that were paved. Some have settled, some have not. It's not the smoothest ride right now, and we fully acknowledge that. We've had multiple discussions about what we can do to temporarily kind of improve the ride quality along Summer Street. However, we've also looked at it alternatively as saying, well, if we have ruts and depressions, people certainly aren't going to be driving fast, and I think they'll regret it if they do, just given the current condition of Summer Street. So this is not to say, it's really bumpy, things of, the road's not smooth. It may work in such a way where it's an advantage on slowing traffic down. Not to say that's something we often rely on and certainly don't encourage, but we are anxious to see if that has an effect on speeds and how really people's driving behavior. So certainly if we do find that cars are speeding on Summer Street, we can increase the number of police details we have. to help mitigate that. We do have a stoplight at Central in summer, so it's not going to be a freeway between school and Belmont. So just want to quickly add that.
Thank you, Dan. Our next question is from Ian Beatty. I believe this means no planned 2023 work on Summer Street west of Spring Street. Is that right? I think that might be alluding to phase 2 of the Spring Hill Sewer Separation project that we're not in the process of right now.
Was the question west of Spring Street or west of School Street?
West of Spring.
West of Spring. That's correct. Yep.
Yeah, there's no work west of Spring. That's the project limit.
Yep.
An anonymous question: is there danger of lead because of all the dusty lead dirt? Should we not let our kids play outside? I don't believe there is danger. You know, I would not have your kids play in our construction zones. But if you live on Oxford Street and there's work going on Avon Street, I don't think there's any concern there. Dan, do you have any feelings on that?
We do have, every granular piece of material that gets excavated and can't be reused as backfill. It goes through an extensive classification system. We have certain items within the contract, depending on the level of contamination, and the overwhelming majority of the soil that we've removed from site from a lot of these trenches has been clean natural fill. I don't know off the top of my head what the lead levels are. I'm certainly happy to look into that, but I do not believe it should pose a health hazard.
Thank you, Dan. John Councilman asks, with work beginning on Gibbons, Cambria, and Westwood, is there a plan to alleviate issues with the loss of parking? So, John, we stagger the work we're doing. So we try not to have them do multiple streets at one time. So, before they jumped the Central, Summer Street was pretty much, finished, except for maybe 2 catch basins on the other end of the street. As they're doing Berkeley, Cambria, you can park there, park on Gibbons and Westwood. As they finish Berkeley, they will jump to the next street. Parking will then be available on Berkeley. So it is staggered of how we plan it, because we don't obviously want to remove all the parking at the same time for the neighborhood.
Jesse, mind if I interject really quickly? Sure. I think this was another question that came up maybe a few weeks ago, a month ago, about how many, it's essentially a temporary no parking sign that our contractor's putting up. We took note of this too, that they had an awful lot of these cones with signs that said no parking for work that wasn't happening on the street for that day, that week, 2 weeks even. We understand that certainly takes away options from you folks here in the neighborhood. And there are times the schedule changes where if they plan to go on a certain street, they've posted no parking signs for that day or that week. Something comes up or they hit a delay with an unknown utility and they can't get there. We ask our contractor to either go remove those signs or update the dates. Please be cognizant that they do include dates at the bottom of those signs. But it did get to a point, and I think we even had a conversation, our consultant and us had a conversation with our contractor saying, you can't just post no parking signs every single street and say that you're going to work there.
Right.
This goes back to planning and scheduling. Be confident. We wanted them to be confident in their schedule and be confident in their planning, so that when they do post these no parking signs, they are they're working, and we're not just putting signs up for the sake of putting signs up, and you folks can't find a place to park because none of you want to get a ticket. So that's something we're trying to stay on top of. Obviously, it's a challenge given all the streets, all the work going on. We're certainly doing our best. Again, this is where we'd ask you folks, if you see an excessive number of no parking signs on your street and nothing happening, please tell us. We'll have those removed and free up some parking.
Right. Next question is from Cyril Picard. Are there any plans for bicycles during the construction period? On a bike, Central Street is currently barely usable with increased traffic on School Street, which of the parking spot is quite narrow. That street will also become dangerous. So Cyril, Central Street is finishing up construction. We will have them do some trench restorations before the winter to make it bikeable again. So that should be in the next month or so.
That is a good point to carry forward though too, Jesse, as we move on to some of these other streets. You know, certainly if there's an opportunity to provide enough width for bicyclists to go by safely, right? That's the key word here, safely. Let's do it. So let's keep that in mind going forward. It's a great comment.
M. Duffy asked, is the plan for the streetscapes posted on the town's website or some other public place? So they are on our website, our Somerville Voice page, which the website is actually on the screen right now. We have 3 sets of plans. There's not just one giant picture showing what all the streets were going to look like. It's kind of broken down by where a tree goes, where the mobility improvements go. Something we could definitely look at and see if we could put something together that's more encompassing of everything and not like plans, but just like a nice poster.
Yeah, I think if you do click that link to our website, there's a sidebar on the right-hand side. If you scroll to the bottom of that, it lists volumes 1, 2, and 3 of these construction plans. I believe it's volume 3 that has like landscape materials layout plans that should show bike lanes like on Summer and Central. So check that out. If you have any issues trying to find what you're looking for, please let us know. We can steer you in the right direction.
Julia Horowitz asks, can you drop the link into the chat of the questions here since we can't click the screen image? Another question from Donald. With the removal of the transit on Avon Street, we got a letter in the door citing asbestos concerns and that certain safety measures were being taken. However, when I looked out my window at the construction, the workers were taking pipes out with bare hands. So Donald, this is something that we need to know about immediately. You know, this is obviously a safety concern that you need to reach out to us so we can address with our contractors. It has to be something that is in real time. I mean, at this point, all of the transient pipe has been removed, but it's something that we want to deal with immediately. Crystal asked to have the contact information back on the screen. It is there. We talked about Hershey Street. This is a good question from Clifford Hirschman. What is the process for notifying services such as Waze about street closures? The info is often inaccurate. So, Clifford, we don't have control over that. I don't really know how to speak to it. Like, it's just something the city has never been able to control with all the construction we've had.
Yeah, I can offer my limited knowledge on the topic. And this really stems from our other project on Somerville Ave. Whenever we close a road, you know, Waze, Google Maps, one of those companies, whatever, they reflect that road's closed. That notification disappears the second one person using Waze or using Google Maps goes down that road. It then and again, this is way outside of our purview. This is just what we've sort of learned through trial and error. All it takes is one person in a car with one of these apps that they're using. They go down a street that's closed. That app says that road's now open when it may not be. I don't think there is a way for us to control that, unfortunately. We can certainly follow up with our communications team and see what experience they've had in the matter, but I know that's been a recurring problem in the past and it sounds like it's happening again. So I wish we could provide a better answer for you. I really do.
Yeah. Next question from Jennifer Gagner. Regarding the water flowing down Central Street, there was also a lot of leaves. All of this blocks the bike lane. I have to bike in the roadway and sometimes cars honk. Is there anything can be done to clear the bike lane of leaves and water? Excuse me. This is something that we will address with the contractor when they need to do more street sweeping, even kind of outside the project limits. Because, you know, that once you hit that part of Central Street, it's actually outside their limits. But if what they're doing is affecting it, we will have them address it. This is a good question from Anonymous. The roads are very rough in places. Will there be any temporary paving to get us through the winter? Also, will there be any relaxing of snow emergency parking restrictions this winter, as so many spots are unavailable? Unfortunately, no. So Gioso is responsible for snow removal in our work zone. So same way as the city does it, Gioso will do it. So when you get the robocall, which may come from Nick, letting you know that there's a snow emergency, you still need to abide by it, even if you live on a street that we are doing construction. Eric Ludwig says, can notices be given to residents whose driveways are going to be blocked? 1 day's notice is fine. We are blocking on occasion without notice. Absolutely something we can look into. One of the things I always tell people, and this is not just related to this project because I deal with construction of the city, please just go out and talk to the contractor on the street and just say, hey, I need to get out. Can you please let me out? They should not give you any pushback. If they do give you any pushback, this is not just Gioso, anyone, Eversource, National Grid, call me, because they are our contractors. They have permits through the city. If I find out that they are being out of line, they'll be shut down. So first step, just have a conversation with them. They will help you out. You know, they don't want to cause any, issues, but if they are causing an issue, please reach out to me. Our property, home and yard is covered in a thick layer of dust, dirt. I know you discussed dirt, but how will this be dealt with? Obviously, all the properties around us are like this. Once again, once you please email us and we can have a follow-up discussion about this. Jennifer Clara, to follow up your Hershey Street answer, does this mean Hershey itself will not be dug up, just the intersection of Oxford and Berkeley? Does that mean Hershey Street won't need inspections? So Hershey Street is having water installed, so there will be some digging on Hershey Street, correct, Ian?
Yes, springtime.
Yeah.
Which, for those that live on Hershey Street, you should also be getting, a pre-construction home inspection offered to you, whether you choose to accept it or not.
Yeah.
But that will happen before any work starts on Hershey. Yeah.
Yeah. Next question is from Christina Morgan. On the letter about the pre-construction survey, the contact phone number was wrong. You reached out to them and they were finally able to reach the company by calling the office, but we nearly missed the window because of this. The subcontractor has a list of houses surveyed. Could the city contact the others with the correct info? Once again, this is something we'll discuss with Gioso and make sure the subcontractor is providing the correct information, because we obviously want all these pre-construction surveys to be done. And we will verify that this is happening correctly.
Yeah, that's another great question. I don't think I was aware. So
yeah.
Excellent.
Kathy Gregory, is there a chance there'll be speed humps put on Berkeley Street? There are a lot of kids on the street and cars often go very fast. So this is something we definitely talk about in our next meeting. Dan, do you know off the top of your head, Berkeley Street gets speed humps?
I'm tempted to say no. I think Berkeley Street did not, at least in the plans here, receive a speed hump.
Yeah.
Those were reserved for Summer Street, School Street, Summer Street, Central Street, if I'm not mistaken. I'll double check.
Yeah. Dennis McNeil, 32 parking spots lost on Central. Is this all between Summer and Highland? If so, would that mean no parking available on Central between Summer and Highland? Dan, do you want to speak to that and what we're going to be building for a cycle track?
Yeah, I wish we had a cross section here. So this is something that we'll likely spend a lot more time talking about next spring as we kind of start looking at some surface restoration work here. So Central Street, the end result at the completion of this project is that Central Street is going to become a one-way street northbound. It's going to be a 12-foot wide lane only with no parking available on it. We're basically taking out the parking. We're widening the sidewalks. The cycle tracks on either side of this one 12-foot lane are going to be, I think they're both 5 feet wide. And so if you can envision, and this is why I wish we had a cross section of the roadway of what the final design will look like. You'll have sidewalks on both sides, a paved cycle track, a 1.5 to 2 foot buffer, curbing, and then the roadway, one lane. So that's the reason why the parking removal on Central is so much higher than the other side streets.
Donald Wade with another question. With the random closing, blocking of streets, are the emergency services being kept up to date? With the storage of construction vehicles on both sides of Avon, the chance of a fire truck making it the whole way is slim. So Donald, we do have conversations with police and fire. I actually send an email out to all emergency services every Friday, letting them know where our contractors are going to be. It's also not just for this project, it's for any public utility, National Grid, Eversource, and then any street project we have going on. So the Chief Green is very much a partner of this. Dan sent them an email early today about Highland Ave, just want to get his concerns about it. They are very much involved in the conversation and sometimes tell us we need to make changes.
I think our fire chief has, I don't want to speak for you, Jesse, has my number on speed dial. I've gotten calls, 8, 9, 10 o'clock at night, 6 a.m. So we make it a point, and even telling our contractors, that amongst all the priorities that we have for safety, it's emergency services right at the top. So no matter where they're working, that's one of the first priorities we try to accommodate.
Another question. Trull is routinely closed by construction project, blocking access to Oxford and Berkeley. I actually got a call this week letting me know that as well as we were starting work. Trull, the reason it was closed is because there was some utility work done for 124 Highland Ave. So they were closed for that, but that should be complete, correct, Dan?
The work for 124 Highland is actually just starting here this week. So
Okay.
they have about 2 weeks worth of work to do. Kind of midway on Trull, heading south towards Oxford, and then at that point, call it 2 to 3 weeks. That work should be done for that development.
Yeah. But we've throughout this project, we've been coordinating with 124 Highland because we are kind of in the same footprint for some of the work. Question from James MacArthur: were building sprinkler systems connected to the water bypass? Were they left unconnected?
Sprinkler systems are connected to the bypass. Yes, we cannot allow fire suppression services to be disconnected. So oftentimes they're a different size than a standard water connection or like a residential connection. They're often bigger, right? Sprinkler systems need a lot of water. So we connect those to bypass and we'll reconnect those to the new water main with a new service for fire suppression.
Tom Morgan, I see your question. Why don't you just email us that, because we'll have you follow up with our engineering staff about a permit you'll need for that driveway.
Jesse, I do want to point out, I know originally we had planned to have this meeting go until 7:30. Looks like we're a couple minutes before 7:30 right now. I know we haven't actually gotten to any verbal questions and answers here. How many more questions in the chat do we have? Do you know, or a rough sense?
I'd say about 10, but some of them are the same.
Okay. Well, everyone, what we can do, I know we anticipated ending this meeting here at 7:30. The three of us can stay late. We can stay another half an hour. We do want to be cognizant of everyone's time. However, I do want to remind folks, this meeting is being recorded right now. So if any of you do have to go and don't have the opportunity to ask a question here this evening, please check back. We'll have this recording up on our city website. Refer back, someone could be asking the question here in the next half an hour. If not, you've got our contact info up now. Feel free to follow up later tonight, tomorrow, any point beyond.
Yeah. A few more from the chat. Is there any plan in the future to extend this work further north on Central Street? That is not included in this project.
Yeah, not that we know of. At least off the top of our head. We'd have to check our capital investment plan.
Jesse and Dan, sorry, just a quick interjection as we come close to our originally scheduled finish time. We've had a few folks in the chat ask about signing up for city alerts to receive the calls, emails, in text that Jesse and Dan have referred to during the presentation. I'm going to drop that URL into the chat. You can sign up for city alerts there if you're not already signed up. You can kind of choose to submit different methods of contact information. Since you're likely in a neighborhood that has a lot of work ongoing, I would recommend selecting email, phone, and text, and I'll make sure you get notifications about that work as it happens. So I'll drop that in the chat, and if you have any questions about the particular alerts that we're sending, don't hesitate to reach out to us as well.
Another one from Donald about Avon. What about snow removal from sidewalks that are now gravel? How are we expected to resolve that one? So Donald, as we said earlier about Avon Street, you may have missed it, is that they're going to be backfilled as a finish up on Avon Street this year with asphalt, just as a temporary measure until they come in next year and do real sidewalks.
Yeah, any dirt gravel sidewalk will be paved here in the next few weeks.
Yeah. Once again, I see a lot of people asking about home inspections. So once again, please just email us and we will connect you to the right people. Magdalene Lampert, another question about Benton Road. Central Street is going to become one way. What will happen on Benton Road? As you know, effectively, travel can now only travel in one direction while parked on both sides of Benton Road. This is someone actually, I've gotten this question a lot, not just here. This is something that I believe the city councilor, hey Ben, put forward in a meeting last week for a study to see if Benton Road could be turned into a one-way street. So I think that's where the next steps are, where the mobility team will look at it and do kind of a traffic study and see if it makes sense. But that's something that is outside of this project. But I definitely have heard that a lot from people. Corey King, with the construction on the Highland Avenue on the corner of Central and Highland, interrupt any utilities on Central Street. I imagine they probably mean utilities on the other side, not where we just did work. Also, will Central be repaved once construction is complete in the next couple of weeks? Lastly, will there actually be a break in construction work before the streetscape work begins in the spring of 2023? You want that, Dan? It's a lot.
Yeah, can you give me those, break them up for me? I think
right.
the first one was any impacts to utilities north of Highland on Central. Did I hear that right?
I think the question is work on Central above Highland. So like not the part that we're currently in, but will anything be affected on the other side?
Okay. The short answer is no. The longer answer is we do have work within the Central Highland intersection. We may, for that work, we do have some water work involved, likely next spring, but for the next few weeks into the next 2 months, no, we really shouldn't be impacting any utilities up there. We'll be doing some simple drainage and sewer work. So I don't anticipate any impacts to, like your water service, for example. And furthermore, I guess that section of Central Street, as you're coming south to Highland, so this Central Street north of Highland, that's outside of our project limits. So we really don't have much utility work up there at all within the whole scope of this project.
Another portion of this question was, will there actually be a break in construction work before the streetscape work begins in spring of 2023? So no, this is a 3-year project that is continuing, but would there be a break between winter 2023 or really fall and then spring of 2024 if all of the subsurface work is complete? Because we can't do any sidewalk work or green infrastructure.
It's possible, yeah. I think for most of the streets here, the goal is certainly to try to get all the streetscape work completed by this time next year, right? So a lot of streets that have utility work has been done on this year will get, call it a surface treatment next year, and then we're really done with those streets. So one thing I as we're talking about this, I think I forgot to mention way at the beginning of this presentation. This is a 3-year project. Substantial completion is May 2024. I think final completion is September 2024. So $23.5 million project slated for 3 years. We're about in a few months from now, come February-ish, 23, will be the first year complete. Next year is going to be a mix of utility work on some of these streets that haven't had it yet, with surface work on streets that have had utility work done this year. And then by 2024, yeah, that winter from 2023 to 2024 should be relatively quiet, I would expect.
So guys, we got through all those questions. So let's take some live questions. So I do ask that people who have not asked questions yet in the chat, I'd like to take them first. Ellen Friedman's had her hand raised for quite a while at this point. Nick, will you please unmute her?
Yes, Ellen, I just asked you to unmute. You should receive a notification now. Ellen, at this point, I think you should have permission to speak. You want to check that your microphone isn't muted in the lower left corner of the Zoom.
Ellen, can you hear us? Ellen, we're going to come back to you. So Nick, will you just mute Ellen real quick and then we'll come back. Next up is going to be our good friend Joel Bennett.
Hello there.
Hey, Joel.
Hi. I have a bunch of things. Some simple, some not so simple. Thanks for having the meeting. I appreciate it. One thing I've noticed is on Summer Street, the spikes that held the temporary water main in place, a lot of them are still sticking out of the asphalt.
Joel, can I interject? How recently did you notice that? We did a walkthrough the other day.
Some today.
Okay.
Yeah, they're kind of right in the gutter. Some of them are kind of dislodged and some are kind of half in, but it seems kind of like somebody could lose a car tire or.
Yeah, absolutely. If you want to email us the exact location, we'll have those taken care of.
Well, yeah.
Well, I will say this, Joe, we will be meeting with our contractor tomorrow.
Yeah, I think just tell them to walk the street.
I was just gonna say, yeah, first thing tomorrow when I get out there, I'll walk up and down the street with them, point out each and every one we see. We'll go all the way up to Spring Street, turn around, and come back the other side.
Thanks. You actually Belmont. The water replacement went all the way to Belmont.
Oh, the bypass. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. And then I know I emailed you guys about the manhole covers. And the historic one in front of the museum is going to be preserved. And I'm interested in how we can figure out a way to preserve the other ones and not and I understand it's complicated to use them as manhole covers, but maybe in other ways. I did photograph them all. And they all appear to be the same cover minus the granite curb, the granite around it. So they seem to be all of the same age. Do you think we might be able to do that instead of them being scrapped?
We can certainly have a conversation with our contractor, Joel. I believe, and I'll double check for you too, just so I can feel some level of confidence here in my answer. When our contractor does remove these old castings, manhole covers and frames, they assume ownership, just kind of ancillary to the work they're doing. So it becomes part of one of their pay items to remove these and dispose of them. Doesn't mean we can't have a conversation with them about saving some though. So let me double check on what the language is within our contract. And if that is the case, we can certainly, as early as tomorrow, talk with them about, how many of these do you have currently from the work you've done over the past 8 months? Which, to be honest, I would think the answer is close to none at this point. But moving forward, how many more can we save as they continue on with this work, especially in winter?
Yeah, they're basically from Bow to School Street. That's where they're located.
Oh, okay. All right.
Yeah.
Great.
So, and then a simple thing, Gioso's phone number isn't anywhere. Seems like a little thing, but one Sunday I witnessed that the water thing that was shooting on somebody's house, and I called 311, and then I called the fire department, and then I thought, oh, I'll just call Geoso. And it just took me a little while to get the number, and it just would have been nice if there were phone numbers around.
So Joel, that's our responsibility. So if you notice that, you need to contact the city and then we contact the contractor.
So I did do that, but I couldn't get through to 311, and the fire department wasn't showing up.
Right. And Joel, like we've said multiple times, I'm the contact.
Okay, on a Sunday.
On a Sunday.
Okay, cool. I also didn't, but I do think there is some language that says that their phone numbers are supposed to be somewhere where you can see them. Their trucks are all over the place and it's very close, but there are no phone numbers on them. But whatever, that's fine. Another thing that I've been noticing, and this is more on projects that I see happening, and I'm hoping that it might be able to get nipped in the bud on this project. A lot of times, like I've been noticing it with a lot of the gas work, the gas shutoffs are not actually parallel with the sidewalk. And I feel like if we're getting new sidewalks, because they actually come in, when they do the gas main work, they end up pouring a new.
Joel, I don't want to interrupt. We have a lot of people, but this is not relevant to this project.
So the piece that's relevant is I would like to make sure that in this project, that there must be some sort of issue around how far they can be depressed into the cement or sticking out. I would like to see something like that, so they're not a tripping hazard.
Yeah, we can follow up with, let's follow up with Eamon, Jesse. Eamon is our trench inspector within our office, and he oversees some of this utility work. I'd have to check what their contract states in terms of that language, Joel, but certainly something we can follow up on.
Yeah, because it would be a lot better to do it before me calling and saying, oh, this is below the surface, and them having to dig up the sidewalk to make it level with the surface. Just trying to be proactive. Great. Thank you so much.
All right, Joel,
Joel.
thank you. And we'll definitely do that walkthrough tomorrow of Summer to Belmont to figure out
Yep.
where the spikes are.
Sweet.
Nick, can you mute Joel and let Ellen speak again?
Yes, Alan, you should have the ability to unmute now.
Hey, Ellen, you there? Hi,
I don't know what's going on here.
we can hear you.
We can hear you now, Alan.
Well, that's good. So after, I'm sorry, I don't have a question.
But I have a question. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay,
Chris.
this
Chris.
is Chris. Yeah, Chris Guerrero. I was curious about the changing Central to one way and the bicycle lanes. As you may or may not know, there has been quite an uproar in Cambridge for the city of Cambridge having upended their street traffic. And in fact, I think there are 4 lawsuits against them. So I'm just wondering, when was this decision to make Central one way? And also, was the decision to add bike lanes made at the same time? Where are those decisions made? I mean, is that in the traffic department? Is it in the city council? I'm curious about when.
Sure. So, hey, Chris, how are you? So Dan and I are handling the construction side of this. We took over the project from our coworker, Halima Qureshi, and she handled a lot more of the design elements. So when the project was being designed by Stantec and city staff, input from many different city departments, fire, mobility, parking
Public.
in the public, and we had many public meetings about this, it then goes to the traffic commission. To do such a change where you are removing that much parking, it has to be voted on by the traffic commission.
Yeah.
So that happened about 2 years ago and it had pretty strong support from the neighborhood and really at large of like the bike community.
And I do want to add here, just so it's clear that the bike lanes, they are separated from the roadway. So the north and south cycle tracks, we call them cycle tracks when there's a buffer between the roadway and these lanes. They are at sidewalk elevation. So they're not on the road. The bike lanes are not on the roadway. They're up at the sidewalk elevation. So you've got, if you look from right to left, you'd see sidewalk, a bike lane at the same elevation, buffer space, then your roadway. And then on the other side, you'd have that same buffer space, you know, you mirror it. It's the buffer space on the other side. And then the bike lane and sidewalk are above the roadway. So they're not, you won't have bicyclists in theory. I can't say in practice, but in theory, the bikes will have their own lane at sidewalk grade. So they're not in the roadway themselves.
Yes, thank you. I think since all that must have taken place during COVID, I certainly didn't hear about all of those, if there were public meetings, actual meetings, or whether it was Zoom, but I didn't hear about that. Okay, thank you.
Yeah, I would suspect it was Zoom. Like Jesse said, the design process took place, about 2 years ago now. And at the time, Jesse and I actually, we weren't involved with this project. Another project manager in our office who has since left the city. She was handling this, and we did receive copious amount of notes from her about these public design meetings. But yeah, I'm fairly confident they were online.
Actually,
similar to how this is.
I just actually got a few texts from people who went to those meetings in public. They were held at the high school. So
Wow.
pre-COVID, not.
Oh, wow. Okay. I stand corrected.
Yeah,
Okay.
this has been a project that's been in the works for years, that multiple meetings and community input. So Ellen and Chris, we thank you for your comments tonight.
Thank you.
Great. Thank you.
So 7:45, we're gonna take about 3-4 more questions if they're quick. Up next will be James Cassidy. Hey,
Good
James.
evening, Jesse, Dan, and Nick.
Good
Jim
evening.
Cassidy, I live at 15 Avon Street. I've been living this nightmare now for a couple of months. Jesse, we did talk at the meeting that was at City Hall, at the high school.
Yep.
You know, couple of things I'd like to ask. I hope there is going to be some type of repavement of Central Street before you start this Highland Ave piece, because that is a disaster, as well as some type of repaving of Avon Street after we go through the situation of water connections. I know that they're also doing the sanitary connections. Is there any other updates on, I know at the meeting at the high school, there was the conversations that you folks brought forward about if there are any lead water lines from the houses to the sidewalk shut off, that the city was going to be replacing those. Is there any more conversations about that? I know that both sides across from us and my next door neighbor had some of their water connections done today. I'm just kind of curious on that.
Yeah.
And, you know, in the last piece that I would like to ask also is that, you know, with your streetscapes and all of the niceties that people are looking for, of putting bike lanes in and taking away parking spaces from Summer Street, Central Street, that Avon Street is going to get inundated with more of those cars are going to be dumped into Avon and other side streets in the area. But then you're also going to be narrowing the corners of Avon from at school and at Central. Are we going to be eliminating the 85 bus that comes down here? It's bad enough for that poor bus driver to make the swings onto this street now and trying to get down Avon onto School Street. And now you're going to be narrowing the corners, you know, on that there. I'm just kind of really curious.
Sure, James. Lot to unpack there. You got multiple questions. So let's start with lead services. So I'm one of the managers of that project. One of the things we did is we identified all of the addresses in our project limits that had lead, and they were all removed this year by actually a different contractor who's handling the lead service project.
Okay.
Dan, as you finish your drink,
Yeah, excuse me.
do you want to speak about our MBTA coordination and the possible future for the 85?
Yes. Yeah. So James, great questions here with the 85. Certainly, it's been a challenge for them as they're still operating through our construction and occasionally have to detour themselves. However, when we do get to the streetscape portion of Avon Street and where Avon meets school, kind of the outlet there, we had a lot of back and forth with the MBTA about making that turn as it is. So we do have a curb bump out there to really help facilitate that bus turning. So I guess before I get into that, yeah, we designed this around the 85. We hope the 85 service continues. The future of the 85 is within the MBTA, but we're moving full steam ahead, assuming that the 85 will be here for a very long time. So at the end of Avon Street, you know, we're taking out 2 parking spots. It's almost, in a way, pushing the bus kind of to the north side of Avon Street, so it's got a bigger swing radius, so it doesn't end up driving over the sidewalk with the back wheels like it does today. And furthermore, on School Street, kind of, I forget the number, 74, 73, something like that, opposite Avon, there's about 3 parking spaces on School Street that we're going to be removing for the bus to make that turn.
Okay. All right. And
that
I
makes
guess
sense.
it does. And so you'll be probably taking the spots down around 1 Avon Street on the northbound side, or are we looking at the southbound side of taking spots on Avon? Because basically the southbound side is where the bus stop is. And I thought there was no parking in a bus stop anyway. So I was just kind of curious on that piece there. But so we're going to be seeing hardtop being put in on the southbound side of the sidewalks until next year. Tree removals in the next couple of weeks. Are they going to be removing stumps and all of that at the same time? Or is all of that going to be sitting there until the streetscape is done, I guess?
Yeah, so for the first question there, we'd be removing parking from the northern side of Avon Street there. Is that number 1?
Number 1 is the house that's on the corner of
Yes, yeah.
Avon. Yes.
Yep, so we'd be taking those, I think it's the 2 back-to-back spots there, keeping the bus stop where it is, and then taking those spots on School Street as it makes that turn. And then on your second question here, our contractor is going to be paving the southern sidewalk that it's still gravel right now for the winter. When they come to do the tree removals, they likely will leave the stump in place for the winter. I know it's going to be a bit unsightly, but when they pave the sidewalk, it's a temporary measure until we can pour new concrete panels next spring. So when they come, what they're about to pave in the next 2 weeks, they will be ripping up again in the spring to put in new concrete sidewalk. So when
It's temporary measures for the winter, so you know,
Yeah.
you can walk and not walk in dirt.
yeah.
Okay, well, I thank you. And I guess my last question is, it's more of a comment that I think that, you know, moving forward, I think that these meetings are great. And having them in a Zoom, I guess, is an easier method, but I think an in-person meeting, so that we could try to get that a little bit more and have them a little bit more often, other than every quarterly time during the year with these projects.
Sure. I mean, that's great feedback. You know, we have people who really do prefer this kind of virtual. I think we've all kind of gotten used to it, but Dan and I also like seeing each other in person. We were talking about how we both haven't worn a tie in the same location in like 6 months together, probably since our last meeting. So yeah, I think maybe in the future we'll try and have.
Yeah,
one
no,
person.
that's great feedback.
Yeah.
We'll definitely
Well,
consider
thank
that.
you.
Yep.
Thanks for the comments tonight, James. Let's move to our next person as we wrap up for the evening. I may pronounce this wrong. I do apologize. Thais.
Sorry about that. Just give me
Hi
one
there.
moment. Oh, there you go.
Good
Sorry.
evening.
I had a question regarding street cleaning and ticketing. I've noticed that, like, given all of the construction, there's really not enough parking spots, especially when they're street cleaning, much like, I mean, on any given day, but especially when they're street cleaning. And for instance, this past week, there were, you know, my car plus maybe 9 or 10 other cars in a row that were ticketed for street cleaning on a street that isn't being swept. Like, there's no street sweeping happening, but they're still ticketing. And I'm wondering if there is any way that, you know, there would be some sort of either forgiveness or refund of tickets that have occurred, because there's too many construction vehicles for street sweeping to be happening. Like, you can't get down the streets, but there's still $50 tickets being given, you know, every week. Which
Yeah.
adds up, especially when there's nowhere else to park.
Yeah, no, that's definitely a good comment. It's something that's definitely out of Dan and our control. I think one of the issues, if a street sweeper is not coming, you know, I'm not sure the PCO is aware of that, and therefore they're ticketing because you're parked in an illegal spot for that day. Every ticket does have information on how to appeal. I think it's definitely worth a shot, but it is out of our control and with the parking department.
I have appealed them. They have said, you know, they're issued legally, sort of. So I just figured I would ask.
I guess first, PCO is a parking control officer, in case you weren't aware. Second, just out of curiosity, do you know what street it was? Or
So I live on Central, but I believe it's been on Gibbons for the most part. That's where I park at the moment, because there's obviously no parking on Central. And given that there's no parking on Central, it's, you know, very competitive for parking on the
sure, no,
surrounding
understood.
especially on street cleaning days. So I think people have sort of just been resigning themselves to the fact that they might get a ticket because there's simply nowhere else to park.
Matter of fact, I got a ticket last week. I just paid it. Let us follow up. I mean, I don't know if we can do anything about your ticket per se, but we can certainly try to improve how we communicate construction impacts with our colleagues over in the parking department.
Okay.
To hopefully try to avoid a situation where, you know, parking is limited and you know, is being taken up by construction equipment and street sweeping is not being performed. Yeah, we'll follow up on that.
Okay, thank you.
Yep, not a problem.
All right, we're gonna take 2 more questions for the evening. Let's do Holly, because she has not asked a question yet. And then we'll do Corey King after that, and we're gonna wrap up.
Yep, you should be able to unmute now, Holly. Holly, you should now be able to unmute.
All right,
Let's take
let's-
Corey and come back to Holly. Yeah.
exactly. That's what my suggestion was gonna be.
Hi, guys.
Hey, Corey.
I was just clarifying because I obviously described it horrible in my very long paragraph in the chat before. I'm actually talking about the section of Central Street that has been worked on since the beginning of May and in 2021. So my question then is, if we're wrapping up here in a couple of weeks, because we live practically right behind Highland Kitchen, right on the corner of Central and Highland there. Does that give you more idea
Yes.
where I'm talking about now? Okay.
Yep.
So now that the water will be reconnected here in the next 2 weeks, is there actually then going to be essentially a break in construction between this time here in November, December, and until streetscapes in the spring? Or is there more work exclusively on Central? I know the stuff on Highland, which I will come back to that question, but exclusively on Central, right where we are, is it going to be a little bit of a hiatus for a little bit?
Yes. You're in the truest sense that you're just behind Highland Kitchen. You'll have a bit of a reprieve. they will be, working in the Central Highland intersection
Right,
for 3 weeks.
yeah.
So you may have some, as you're close enough, you may have to, survive those impacts there.
It's more of like a good traffic break because like we haven't been able to get deliveries or things like that during the day until after 4 or 5. So just having some reprieve from that,
I see. Yeah.
I've
Yeah.
given up on noise. Noise will
Sure.
never go away.
Yeah.
It will never go
So-
away.
I'm sorry.
So Corey, we're gonna be in that intersection of Highland and Central for a couple of weeks, but then the project moves east. So,
Okay. So then that was my question about utility. So then since we're right there at the corner of Central Highland, we for some reason we're connected to everything and every cross street where we are. So then would we by any chance, now that we're just getting water back, are we going to be affected by any water, sewer, gas, anything of what's being dug up at Highland now for those next couple of weeks?
are you saying, are you gonna have to go on bypass for the other work?
I'm asking about that or any gas or any sort of, because I wasn't clear what's being dug up right there at the corner of
Gotcha.
Central and Highland.
Yeah.
Okay,
Yeah, the short answer, Corey, is no. The work that we're doing, call it from the Central Highland intersection and then continuing down Highland. That's all sewer and drain related work, not water work, just based on the time of year. So the short answer is no, you shouldn't have any impacts. You should have a bit of a hiatus here.
Okay.
It may not be perfect, but certainly a lot less than what you've been used to here for the past few months.
Yeah, it's been very interesting because we ended up going right back basically against the gas project in March 2021, fed right into this project. So where we've been, it's been nonstop with blocked roads and noise and everything since March of 2021. So I will be happy for something of a reprieve for a little bit.
Thank you for your
So-
patience. first
yeah,
and
Corey, we get it. Like, this is, for all of you who are still here, this is not an easy project. We have done another project on Somerville Ave where we put a giant hole in Union Square and affected all the businesses there for a couple of years. We understand that this is rough and we just want to make sure that everyone is aware that we are human beings who want to help you. Like, we want to make sure this goes as easily and as smoothly as possible, even though we know that those words don't usually go well with construction.
Well, now having the contact information will be very helpful because it seemed like, because all of us in our building are all renters. So it seemed like obviously
Mm.
everything goes to our landlord and then we don't hear anything and then it's already happened. And so this will be helpful to have some direct communication information for you guys.
Completely.
Yeah, and please feel free to reach out as frequently as you'd like,
Great.
Even
Thank
on
you.
Sundays, Joel.
even on Sundays.
All right. It's 8:01. I think we're gonna call it a night, folks. Once again, we appreciate you all being here. At one point, we had almost 100 people in this meeting, which is fantastic. We definitely want to make sure we get the word out, and you'll hear more communication going forward as we discuss the Highland Ave detour. And if not, we will see you in April. Thank you all.
All right.
Thanks,
Thank you,
everybody.
everyone, for joining this evening. We look forward to hearing from you and meeting you again in the spring.